So I'll start talking while people are still walking. How's that?
Right.
All I can say is that yesterday morning seems like a long time ago. We we started, I'd say, with we called the session aspirational because we were trying to make the case for why people were interested in sharing individual participant level data. And I think what we've learned over the subsequent day and a half is, at least to this audience, we don't necessarily have to make that case so strongly, that in general there's an agreement that there's value there, and then the issue is in the details. So the only 2 points I'll make, and then Bill will say a few more things, is that besides giving particular reasons why individual participant level data was important, there was a plea for clarity in nomenclature. I gave the plea for clarity in nomenclature about what we meant by data, being very specific, and many talks in the subsequent day and a half, I think, bolstered that argument, especially Steve Goodman, Peter Doshi, and others who gave examples of what kind of data there are out there and how important it is to be clear. And then Dr. Loader made the very excellent point that we also have to be clear on what we mean by sharing, and that also was bolstered in the subsequent day and a half, because we've seen many, many different models and proposals about what sharing means. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, and the theme which the speakers addressed very successfully, and I'll touch on a couple of examples to go to the high level of why are we putting all this energy and discussion into this. And it really has to do with the fact that complex illnesses, complex situations that affect us all are not amenable to simple single study data that's analyzed once, done once, and just disappears. And I think Dr. Califf particularly provided very strong examples where in the one field of medicine we have reduced the heart rate related to cardiovascular disease by something like 40% over the last few decades, something like that, which could only be done because people went to figuring out ways and investing in cumulatively building and sharing data sets. And he said quite properly he didn't understand why this model isn't more widely applied. And I think this would resonate with us all today. Dr. Krumholtz, I think, who has been sometimes a gadfly in the field, but also I think has been a tremendous force and acknowledged that there's been a huge cultural shift. So I think we heard that the cultural shift is occurring in all spaces, and frankly, as somebody commented to me along the way, we hear that the incentives maybe in the industry side are beginning to be recognized, but as Miles emphasized, for the academic group to find ways to provide incentives for investigators, government-funded investigators, by such simple measures as finding ways to give credit for sharing data are highly important. And this is a theme that has continued throughout the 2 days, and it remains hugely important. And finally, just the last thing, I think some of the other examples, like Jesse Berlin providing that only by looking at large data sets could you figure out, I believe it was like 15% of the people really were benefited from a transplant therapy. But those people who benefited enormously, and again, only by this sort of cumulative data. So we just keep coming back to this, that for complex illnesses, it's not like, invasive species where you have an antibiotic that hits a single thing and you can be pretty sure you'll get results. Most of the conditions we're talking about now are far too complex for that simple old model upon which a lot of the medical research enterprise was developed. And so I think that was the big takeaway theme, that we have to have the data sharing for true advances for all of our benefits.
And then I have to, in my last 13 seconds, I forgot to emphasize the thing nearest and dearest to my heart, which is the need to inspire trust in the data about each clinical trial. And Steve Goodman used the term, I think, chain of custody or something along those lines, which is a great way to think about it. But I do think transparency does inspire trust in the 99.9% of cases where it will reveal that things were done totally properly. It will benefit all of us.